Hey, souls and spirits out there, welcome back to this sacred space. If you've been following along, we've already journeyed a little bit through the principles of mentalism and correspondence, vibration, and polarity within the Hermetic tradition. Each one has expanded our understanding of Hermetics just a little bit more each time, showing us that the universe is not random, but operates according to kind of timeless spiritual laws. Today, we'll continue on with the principles, with the fifth principle specifically, the principle of rhythm. The Kabbalion expresses it kind of this way: everything flows. Out and in, everything has its tides, all things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. And much like the principle of vibration, this principle suggests that nothing in creation remains still or the same. Everything moves. Everything changes. The universe itself is alive and filled with all kinds of cycles. The moon waxes and wanes, tides, the sun rises every morning and disappears every evening. The seasons change. The planets travel their path across the heavens. And if we think of history, there's a rise and fall of dynasties. Our hearts beat in rhythm. Our lungs inhale and exhale. Even while you're listening to this podcast, thousands of rhythms are taking place inside your own body and around you without you consciously even thinking of them. Life is movement. Life is rhythm. The problem is that most of us spend much of our lives not being aware of it or paying attention to it, or even resisting it. So imagine an old grandfather clock. The pendulum swings to the right, then to the left, then back. It's never perfectly kind of centered unless you know it's not working. But the movement itself keeps the clock functioning. And according to Hermetic philosophy, life behaves much the same way. There are periods of abundance. There are periods of scarcity, seasons of activity, and seasons of rest. There are moments of certainty, and then there are moments of complete questioning. We experience inspiration, followed by just utter exhaustion, confidence followed by self-doubt, expansion followed by contraction. Many people believe something has gone wrong whenever life enters one of these quieter seasons, but perhaps nothing is wrong at all. Perhaps we're simply experiencing the natural rhythm of existence. One of the greatest sources of suffering, I think, comes from expecting life to remain permanently at one point, kind of with the pendulum. We want happiness and success to last forever. We want our relationships to remain effortless. We want our health to never decline. But nature doesn't operate that way. Life doesn't operate that way. No sunrise lasts forever. No winter lasts forever either, though. Likewise, no hardships last forever. The pendulum always swings. And this principle is so connected to the principle of polarity for me. If the principle of polarity holds that everything exists on a line with kind of two ends, then to me, the movement on that spectrum is the principle of rhythm. That's the pendulum swing back and forth, constantly moving, constantly changing. I think the goal is to continue moving forward to the more positive side of whatever we're working on. But there is always going to be that back and forth on the line. That's human nature. One of the best kind of daily examples of sacred rhythm I can think of is in the Islamic traditions, honestly. Rather than separating spirituality from everyday life, daily life itself becomes rhythmic through their prayers. 5 times each day, the followers of the faith pray. They pause to pray. And when I was in Egypt, you could hear it happening all around you. You could hear the prayers being said over the loudspeakers almost everywhere. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, I truly loved it. I loved that reminder. I stopped to pray in my own way when I heard them. It really felt like this recurring pattern gently kind of reoriented the heart in a way. And even in the Islamic tradition, each year, the month of Ramadan introduces another rhythm to their lives. Fasting during the daylight hours, breaking the fast each evening, prayer, reflection, generosity. The cycle kind of repeats, inviting continual spiritual renewal. And rather than seeing rhythm as an obstacle, the practice of Islam transforms rhythm into kind of devotion itself. It's really interesting to kind of watch or read about. And many indigenous traditions throughout the world have long understood life through recurring cycles. While each nation has its own teachings and ceremonies, many emphasize the importance of living in relationship with the changing of the seasons, the movement of the celestial bodies, the migration of animals, and the cycles of birth and maturity and elderhood and death. Among many nations in North America, the medicine wheel serves as a symbol of interconnectedness. Different communities interpret it in very different ways, but is often associated with the four directions, the seasons, the stages of life, and the continual movement of growth and renewal. The lesson is not that life should remain the same. The lesson is that change itself is sacred. One of the most beautiful things about the Hermetic philosophy, I think, is that it continually points us back to observing nature around us. Nature never hurries, yet somehow everything always gets accomplished. Trees don't force themselves to grow. Flowers don't compare themselves to one another. The moon never apologizes for becoming dark at certain points of the month. It simply continues its cycle. Imagine if the moon believed it had failed every single month because it had to disappear for a bit. It would never recognize that its apparent absence has a purpose and it is a part of its beauty. Likewise, your periods of uncertainty in your life are often preparing you for your next phase of growth. The caterpillar doesn't realize its season inside that cocoon appears inactive, yet inside that cocoon, everything is changing. The old body dissolves before the butterfly can emerge, and it can remind us that transformation frequently looks like stillness, oftentimes from the outside. You never know what people are going through. You never know what they're working on. You may see them not seemingly doing a whole lot or not kind of leaving their house, but like they could be doing and working on so much stuff in their space or internally. You just never know. I think of the quote, never judge a book by its cover, when this kind of comes up, because you never know what's inside, what's going on there. Or have you noticed how energy changes throughout the day, specifically your energy? Perhaps you're more creative in the morning, or maybe you're a night owl. Some weeks or days you accomplish an incredible amount. Other days, even simple tasks seem really difficult. Modern culture often tells us we should, perform at 100% of the day all of the time. But biology says otherwise. Hormones fluctuate, sleep patterns change, stress changes things, emotions change. Our attention changes. Our minds and bodies naturally move through rhythms. When we ignore the rhythms or try to push past them, we experience burnout. When we honor them, we become far more productive. I think this is one of the reasons why so many ancient spiritual traditions included periods of rest and retreat, times of silence, times of pilgrimage, fasting, meditation. They understood something I feel like really largely have forgotten as kind of the world as a whole. Rest is not the opposite of productivity. Rest is part of the productivity. Breathing out is simply impossible without first breathing in. And one of my favorite ways to understand this principle is through the idea of kind of spiritual seasons. There are many times when everything feels really exciting. Books practically leap off the shelf at me and I just gotta read them, I gotta know, I gotta understand. Meditations just feel completely transformational. Synchronicities seem to happen every day. Prayers flow just effortlessly. You feel completely connected to everything in the universe around you. Then, all of a sudden, something changes. Meditations become a little too quiet if you're me and your people aren't talking nearly as much. Dreams become ordinary. You start to question everything. You're like, what happened? Where did my momentum go? Where did it all go? You wonder whether you've perhaps lost that spiritual connection. Mystics throughout history have kind of described or tried to describe these periods of time, and rather than seeing them as failures, they recognize them as kind of initiations or invitations, let's say. Sometimes the divine teaches us through persistence, sometimes through silence. Sometimes growth happens through inspiration, other times through perseverance. If every season felt equally as exciting as the next, we might never develop spiritual maturity. Faith deepens not only when everything feels completely awesome and magical, but when we continue showing up even when everything isn't all sparkly and wonderful. I thought of this the other day because, this, I'm surrounded by farming families and communities. Imagine asking a farmer why nothing is growing the day after planting the seeds. The farmer would probably smile, or the ones I know would just shake their heads and probably just walk away like, why are you asking that question? But they understand that nature has its timing. You cannot rush germination. Growth unfolds according to rhythm. Our own lives often require the same patience. Many of us want kind of that immediate healing, that immediate understanding, the immediate enlightenment, immediate success, immediate mastery of whatever it is we're working on. But wisdom matures slowly. Relationships deepen over years. Trust takes time. Character is formed through countless ordinary days. Hermetic philosophy reminds us that every meaningful transformation has its own season. Trying to force growth often delays it. Working with rhythm allows growth to happen naturally. If you've ever had a moment where everything just clicked after months of confusion, you've experienced the principle of rhythm in motion. The pendulum has been swinging beneath the surface kind of all along. But perhaps the deepest invitation of today's principle is learning to kind of trust the process. Not because life is always easy, not because every experience is enjoyable, but because movement itself is natural. Life is really freaking hard, especially lately. I keep saying that, but it just is. Everything feels kind of uncertain sometimes. This year has tested my faith a lot in the world, in spirit, in myself, and I just have to remind myself that nothing remains fixed forever. And this can be difficult when we are grieving, when we are facing kind of financial uncertainty, when relationships end, when our health changes, when we're facing disappointment. Yet the Hermetic sages would gently remind us that every season eventually gives way to another, because rhythm is woven into the fabric of creation itself. The sun has never failed to rise. I know this oppressive heat will give way to autumn eventually, and life keeps moving on, and so do we. The fifth principle of the Hermetic tradition reminds us that the universe is not static. It breathes, it expands, everything has a season, or its tide, or its rhythm. Life is always moving, and we are life itself. So we're not supposed to try to stop the pendulum. The thing is to find the still point within ourselves while the pendulum continues to swing. As students of the mysteries, we are invited to stop fighting those ties and begin to learn from them, to trust that winter prepares spring, that silence prepares wisdom, that endings prepare beginnings, that every inhale is followed by an exhale, and to trust that the divine is present in every phase of the cycle. And in the coming week, try to pay attention to the rhythms all around you. I promise they're there. Watch the sunrise, notice the moon phases, notice your breathing patterns, if nothing else. So until next time, may you walk in harmony with the sacred rhythm of life. I'll see you soon.